What's going on, team? The headlines out there are pretty crazy about Bitcoin. You're hearing these things like Bitcoin billionaire, Bitcoin millionaire, people making money overnight. But there's also probably a lot of people out there that are not making that much money, or maybe they're even losing money. So is Bitcoin something that you've been wondering if you should invest in, if you should buy, and what you should be doing with all that noise? We're going to talk about that in this video. We're going to break down what Bitcoin is, and at the end of this video, you should have a good idea of if it's something you want to get involved in or not. You can kind of take out all the noise that you're hearing out on all the news channels, on social media. We're going to dive into it in this video. I've actually bought and sold cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin for about 4 years now. And we're going to kind of just walk through what I've thought and also some of my thoughts right now, what I think the value is, and I'll give my recommendation at the end of this video in terms of what you might actually think about doing if you are thinking of investing in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Welcome back to Quinn Talks Money. We've all been sitting in lockdown for way too long, and we're probably scrolling on Instagram, looking at the news way more than we should, watching all the videos on Quinn Talks Money, and every other post that you probably see is something about cryptocurrencies, the stock market, Bitcoin, all of these things that you might not be involved in and everyone's telling you to get involved in. So let's all take a deep breath, hit that like button, and then let's jump in. And by the end of this video, you'll have a good understanding of what Bitcoin is and what these other cryptocurrencies are, and you'll be able to decide for yourself if it's something that you should get involved in and if it's something you should be buying. Maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll have another video on Quinn Talks Money, and we'll be talking about the crazy rise in Bitcoin or the crazy fall in Bitcoin. In my own opinion, the question of should I buy Bitcoin really needs to start with what is Bitcoin? It's never a good idea to be getting involved in things that you really have no idea about.
If you think that Bitcoin is going to zero, like if you don't understand the psychology behind it, I don't know shit about blockchain. You don't need to. Like, that's not what this is about.
And one of the reasons that might be a case with you, the fact that you might be a little bit confused about what Bitcoin is because a ton of the people that are actually talking about it really have no idea what it is either. So then all we get is a lot of people that don't really know what they're talking about or don't really know what it is, telling you should do something, and it creates this anxiety and this confusion that just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. So we need to break down what is Bitcoin on a very beginner level, so that you can then understand at the end of this video, is it something that you should be buying? It's like during the tech boom in 1999 and 2000. And although it might be crazy to think about this, a lot of people 20 years ago really didn't know what the internet was. And so then what happened is you have all of these internet stocks that are actually going public on the stock market. Their prices are skyrocketing because there's all this hysteria and there's this craze about getting involved in internet stocks. But a lot of the people that are actually buying them have absolutely no clue what they're buying, why they're buying it. They just hear all of this noise out there telling them that they have to get involved. And it did actually work out really well for some people, but at the end of the day too, a lot of people didn't do so well, and they lost a lot of money in the stock market just by listening to what these other people were telling them to do with buying internet stocks. It created a bubble, and I have this little subscriber count going up here. We are so close to hitting 200 for the month of January. We're halfway there. Can you help me out and click that subscribe? Now, I'm not necessarily saying that cryptocurrency is a bubble. It very well might be, but the idea of getting involved with something before you actually know what it is just never a good idea. You really need to have a basic understanding of something before you get involved. Otherwise, you just run the risk of having someone who maybe you trust and maybe you don't tell you what to do, and then when things go down, you get mad at that person, and then it just creates a ton of stress. So we need to avoid that. So let's break it down. All major currencies that exist today, like the dollar, the euro, yen, franc, peso, all of those are backed by governments and regulated by a government entity or a government body. And so with all of those, the government gets to choose when they want to print more money, and the market then decides what the value of that currency is. And a currency is something that allows you to store value, and that value is understood by the other party who you might be exchanging for goods and services. So if I'm going and buying a chocolate chip cookie from the neighborhood baker, if I'm gonna pay him with the dollar bill, he needs to be able to accept that dollar bill, and we need to have a similar value for what $1 actually equals. If he's going in thinking that a $1 bill is actually worthless, and I'm going in thinking that a $1 bill is worth $1, then we aren't going to actually agree on that purchase. So you need to have both parties actually agreeing on what the rate or what the market value of that currency actually is. And so that's a lot of times what governments are able to do when they're actually regulating a currency and allowing the market to determine what the value is of that specific currency. Now, at a very basic level, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies should act very similar to the dollar, yen, peso, euro, pound, any of those other major currencies. In an ideal scenario, I would love to have Bitcoin get to a point where I don't have to think about buying Bitcoin. I can really think about exchanging dollars for Bitcoin. That's really what you're doing when you're buying Bitcoin, but right now the mindset is still so much as a speculative investment, or you're buying Bitcoin or as some sort of product to buy, rather than a currency, which I think the ideal scenario would be. There's stories in the past when Bitcoin was just starting when people might have paid 50 Bitcoin for a pizza. And basically, 50 Bitcoin for a pizza is about $150,000 in today's value of Bitcoin. That is a large fluctuation from just a few years ago, and that is a very expensive pizza. One way of potentially valuing the future market value of Bitcoin is to think about how much of the total currency market it could actually take up. So all the currency in existence throughout the world right now is about $130 trillion. So let's say that Bitcoin were eventually, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, were to take up about 10% of that market. That would be about $13 trillion that Bitcoin is actually worth. And then you have to also take into account all the other cryptocurrencies that exist, and they might only be a small portion of that market. But at $13 trillion, then Bitcoin, you can actually figure out the price based off how many Bitcoin are in existence. You can determine the price today. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty and it makes it really hard. Let's jump into, should you buy Bitcoin? What is my recommendation? So my recommendation, and again, remember, I am not your financial advisor, so all of these decisions you really should think about and look at some other research as well. My recommendation, if you want to go buy Bitcoin, go for it. I would just say, do not spend money or do not buy Bitcoin or exchange your dollars for Bitcoin with money that you cannot lose. You might actually end up being a millionaire, or it might just end up being something that you lose and you had fun actually doing and learning about. Either way, thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time on Quinn Talks Money.